What do we know about it? It's fizzy, delicious, and it gets you drunk. There are lots of different kinds, but it's so damn expensive. Can't I just make it at home? Of course. The number one rule in homebrewing? Cleanliness. You're gonna drink this stuff, so keeping anything that touches the beer clean is your biggest priority. There's all kinds of nasty stuff that can lead to an infected batch of beer on your hands, counters, and probably your equipment before you clean it, so it's important that you sanitize instead of wasting time and money on a bad batch. Even soap residue can ruin a beer, so it's a good idea to rinse well and get specialized brewing cleaners. The first step in our process is malting the barley. This process involves soaking grains to begin their germination and then halting it by exposure to hot air or kilning. This releases necessary enzymes which are needed to turn the grain starches into sugars. Now it's time for step 2, brewing. Beer is composed of 5 basic ingredients: water, grains, sugar, hops, and yeast. The process starts like brewing a big batch of tea, called wort. First, the water is brought to a boil, and we add grains in a mucilin bag and allow it to steep for an hour. This is called mashing. Then, after dunking the bag in and out of the wort, we place it into a strainer and pour boiling water over the top. Pouring water over it rinses the husks of the grain. This process, known as lautering or sparging, is extremely important as it washes the grain's fermentable sugar into the wort. Then we bring the pot back to a boil. The most important ingredient in our wort, sugar, is added next. This is what the yeast will consume to make the beer alcoholic. Hops are our flavoring ingredient and are added after a rolling boil is achieved. Till that point, however, the sugar is in danger of burning, so we have to stir often. Hops go into the boil over the course of the next hour or more. When added at early stages, most of the flavor compounds dissipate, and we're left with a bitter flavor found in pale ales and IPAs. Hops added 15 to 20 minutes before the end of the boil will enhance the flavor, while hops added in the final 5 minutes create the aroma. After hopping, we crash cool the wort by running it through a spiral of chilled copper tubing. It's finally time to turn our wort into beer. Yeast is added and the fermenter is immediately sealed. We place an airlock on top to prevent any air from entering while letting air out. After 1 to 3 days, our beer begins to ferment. This process can be seen in the airlock as the beer comes to life. When the bubbling subsides, usually about 5 to 7 days, the beer can then be siphoned into the secondary fermenter. This is a large glass carboy which will allow any solids to settle out of our final product while the beer clarifies. A transparent beer is a well-made beer. 2 weeks later, it's bottling day. Cleanliness is once again our biggest factor. After sanitizing siphon, bottles, and caps, we're ready to uncork the secondary. For all intents and purposes, this is beer. It isn't carbonated, however, and therefore not altogether pleasant to drink. Beer is siphoned into a second container to avoid any sediment making its way into the bottles. A small amount of sugar gets placed into the container before siphoning. This ensures its even distribution. Using a bottling wand, beer is added to each bottle. The wand is exactly the right density to leave space in the bottleneck for fermentation. This is important because carbonation is usually created by bottle fermentation in a homebrew setting. The remaining yeast eats the added sugars, which results in a buildup of CO2 and creates our carbonation. Bottles take anywhere from 3 weeks to 4 months to be ready, and some don't achieve their full potential for a year. This is entirely dependent on the style, however, as hoppy beers are better fresh and malty beers age like fine wine. Brewing is an art form, and a chemistry experiment, and a history lesson. It is one of the most fun things you could cook or create, and everyone who enjoys it should try making their own. At least once.